Why do you believe what you believe with reincarnation?
To me, it makes sense. I had a lot of questions about why I felt certain things or why I thought a certain way. And when I started to study about reincarnation, it closed up a lot of answers for me. I didn't believe in reincarnation at first because I was born Catholic. But once I overcame that hurdle and started saying this could be possible, I even opened up more psychically. It didn't scare me. It was like, that makes sense. I guess energy doesn't die. We can come back.
Why do you?
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to do something a little different. I want to talk about how energy doesn't die, that reincarnation is real, and that I know this from experience and from working with my clients in my profession. But first, I want to premise that with how I also speak to dead people. Dead people tend to stay with their body or stay at the scene or haunt you, if you will, until whatever scenario caused their death can be resolved in whatever way that means. Finding the body to lay the body at rest, finding a perpetrator, a murderer or something, an attacker, whatever the case may be. Anything that's left unsolved. The energy of that person, which is their soul, tends to stay around until this is resolved. Okay? Those are the souls that are at unrest. Now, that's not to mean that if your past loved ones come to visit you, that they are not at peace, because they have that ability to step in and say hi once in a while. I'm talking about the ones that are like consistently trying to bring justice to a situation. Okay? And to me, all of this proves that there is really something very powerful to all of us at our core, at our soul level. Our soul never dies. We've lived before and we will live again. Many of us actually bring those memories forth with us in some way, shape, or form. It could be through a birthmark or a scar that nobody knows how you got. And a lot of times, some of these so-called symptoms of reincarnation can be confused with alien abduction. They can be confused with overactive imagination of a child. They can be confused with a lot of different things, rather than really looking at all of the evidence that we could collect to look at a whole picture before we make a judgment or a decision. Because I think that a lot of children who speak of their past life get overlooked. And truly, beyond all other things, I mean, I'm in the business of healing people and helping them to integrate and learn who they are, really learn the self. And so my biggest wish and desire in this profession is that I can help the children to integrate and to understand who they are now and maybe who they used to be. That explains, why they behave a certain way, or why they are the way they are with their characteristics. Because we bring forth fears and phobias from past lives. You may have an unexplainable fear of falling, and it's because you passed that way in a different life. You could have an unexplainable fear of spiders because you died from some venomous bite. Um, People are scared of boats. Maybe they died on a boat in their past life, or an airplane, or so on and so forth. And we bring these things with us, these fears, these phobias, birthmarks even, or the scars, as I mentioned. They also tend to have night terrors and trouble sleeping, or being afraid of the dark, being afraid of being alone, when they have these memories of past lives. that they can't articulate to you because they're so young. And then also, I think something that most people don't consider that might be the most important quote unquote symptom of them all is the feeling of not belonging in the body that you're in a way that would cause gender confusion. You know, there are many people who will argue the point that you're born gay if you're gay, that you're born that way. It's not something that happened to you. Now, granted, there are people that some type of trauma or something happened to them in their earlier years that, you know, steered them to go a different direction other than normal, quote unquote normal, with their path. But for others, this is a very debilitating, conflicting feeling where they always feel like there's something wrong with them because they just don't feel comfortable in the body that they were born into. And I truly believe that that's because they were probably the opposite sex in the most recent past life. And if we could lend that type of education and offer that type of compassion and space for such a thing to be considered, then couldn't we also help them to better understand their self so that they aren't feeling so conflicted and confused in the body that they were given this time? I think that would be a great service to many people. And no, I'm not suggesting that this is how we fix gay people at all, because I don't think there's anything to fix other than the emotional burden that comes with being a child that doesn't feel comfortable in their own skin. And you carry that with you even into adulthood. So that needs to be healed and understood. And to understand that it could be from a past life would allow them to release that emotional hurt and understand their self better. And then also lend them the compassion and the space to realize that this is not something that is part of any type of education or conversation. So nobody around them is at fault or to blame, any different than if we're taught differently um, in our religious aspects or in public school for a particular subject or whatever, because they're just teaching us what they learned. So it's never anybody's fault. But I think this is a really great way to help people to heal the emotional trauma, the lack of self love, because everything I do is about self love. That's why my name is EarthSong Lovecraft. We have to learn to love ourselves. And we can't learn to love ourselves unless we learn who we really are, where we came from in every lifetime. That's a big part of our story. Where did we come from? And we could even speak with, like, perhaps there should be studies done on sociopaths or even maybe psychopaths to see if there was something in their childhood, telltale signs like the night terrors, or speaking of events that nobody else understands that they're remembering from a past life, or that um, built up unexplainable anger that some children will have, or unexplainable fears that go unnoticed, that go untreated, that go uncared for, that builds an animosity up in a person. And maybe this is what actually creates a sociopath to begin with. Maybe we could find something like that out by doing proper, adequate, broader thought studies on such things. Because I think that the whole notion of the psychological aspects that we have in our um, professions and the educations at this point are very narrow minded and could really use some stretching in their thinking. So, we're going to talk about children who remember being reincarnated. And I'm going to start with telling you a little bit about myself. Because as a child, my mother was very fond of making sassafras tea. And I absolutely hated the smell of this sassafras tea. And every time I would tell her, "Oh my God, this smells just like elephant tree bark. It makes me want to puke." And she would laugh at me and tell me I was ridiculous. There's no such thing. Only for me to learn much later in life, actually only as recently as about 6 years ago, I learned that during the last ice age, before the last ice age, the indigenous people of America, the Native Americans, and probably some other people in the world, actually used the bark of a tree that they called the elephant tree because it looked like the leg of an elephant in the way that its bark was. It was shaggy, lumpy, weird bark and thick and clumpy. So it looked like an elephant's leg. And so that's what they called it, was the elephant tree. And they used the bark to make medicine. I clearly had to have lived in that era. And somebody made me drink elephant bark tea, and I hated it. I also had very vivid memories of being afraid of falling, not of heights. I wasn't afraid of heights at all. I was afraid to fall. And I vividly remembered that once my name was Shelley and that I lived in England and I was an equestrian. I rode horses avidly. I was in my early 30s, or excuse me, early 20s, female, Shelley. And one day after riding my horse, I was walking toward the well to get a drink of water. And this very handsome man walked in and caught my eye, and I caught his. So rather than getting the pail to get a drink, I went to sit on the edge of the well and look cute. And I sat back too far, too fast, and I fell in the well backwards and died. And I vividly remembered it. Vividly. I also vividly remembered being a black man, working as a slave, singing folk songs. I remembered how tired I felt, how worn out my body felt, how hot the weather always was, and how I would work so hard that my fingers could have just bled. They were so sore. But I also remember that I had this resilience and true faith in God. And I would sing. I would sing to keep my spirit high because I knew that God would deliver me out of that situation someday. I remember being a young Native American girl on the Trail of Tears. I told my parents all about Joan of Arc before I knew who Joan of Arc is. I just knew that my name was Joan. We've had many, many lives, all of us. And I deal with clients on a daily basis of all age ranges that come to me to talk to me about their past lives. And then I have my children. Many of you know I have 7 children. My father died when I was 17, almost 18. And he told me on his deathbed that if his calculations were correct, which I think basically meant if he had me figured out well enough to be mature enough to handle it, that he would be back with me in about 10 years. And even though I remembered what I remembered, I didn't understand what he meant by saying that. And I really just didn't want to lose my dad. So I didn't want to hear what he had to say. And I got mad at him and told him this wasn't the time for him to try to talk that Zen stuff to me that I didn't understand. And all I knew is that I wanted him to fight to stay alive. 10 years later, I was having my 4th child. The child that started out being triplets. And 2 of them vanished when I was 6 months pregnant. She was born healthy. Everything seemed fine. She was very advanced for her age, much like my oldest child. Learned to walk soon, learned to talk very early, potty trained very young, very easy to do all of those, teach her all of those things. She was very fast at learning everything, just like my firstborn. She came running down a hallway into the room I was in when she was 2 years old, jumped up in my lap, put her tiny little precious hands on each side of my face, and beamed into my eyes this happiness, this light. And she says, I used to be your father, and I used to sit on your lap just like this. And she threw her arms around my neck and she squeezed me so tight, like she just couldn't wait to finally tell me that. I did the math. She was born 9 years and 5 months after I lost my dad. It really blew my mind. But I still didn't try to influence her in any way. I just observed, carefully observed. By the time she was 3, she was playing with concrete trucks and dump trucks and telling me all about how to do concrete work. My dad owned a concrete business. Then she started telling me nautical terms, you know, like port and decks and galleys and staffs and all kinds of nautical words for boats and stuff. And my dad was a captain in the Coast Guard on the riverboats and as a merchant marine. He spent his whole life on the water, on boats. So I started realizing that he really did make it back. And so not only is reincarnation real, but we really can choose our parents. And we really can choose what family we come to. If we understand that in the life we're in when we pass. I think that needs to be part of the understanding before you die, so that the will of your soul can will you back to those people that you love. And I firmly believe that love is the most intense force in the universe, a force to be reckoned with. And then you put strong free will on top of that, and I think you've got a guaranteed destination. I also have another child, a girl, who at the age of 2 and 3 would tell me all about how she used to be one of the very first famous women tennis players. Now, I used to play tennis when I was younger, but not by the time she was born. By the time she was born, because she was my 6th child, the tennis rackets had collected dust and been in the back of closets for a very long time. And she didn't hear stories of going to play tennis. So she didn't even know what tennis was. We didn't watch it on TV or anything like that. But she would tell me all about how she was one of the very first famous women tennis players. And that she really loved hummingbirds. And I was just taken aback by it, even though I had my own memories of past lives. It was like confirmation for me. It was a learning process for me to realize who I am even more and embrace it. And then my youngest, my little genius, already knew how to read and write before he was ever taught. At the age of 3, he was reading full-blown sentences. And when I asked him how he knew how to read, he said he guessed he got a free pass. By the time he was 4, he had walked in the room where his sister and I were watching a documentary about the Grand Canyon. And it was like an aerial view of the Grand Canyon. And he couldn't hear what they were saying because we had little earbuds in that we were sharing. All he could see was the images on the screen. And he walked over to my computer where we sat and he says, "Oh, that's the Grand Canyon. A lot of people die there." And I said, "Milo, why do you say that?" And he said, "Well, people get lost there and then they die because they're hungry and hot." And I said, "Do you remember being there?" And he says, "Oh, I think so." And he's 9 years old now. And to this day, if you mention the Grand Canyon, he will tell you all about how dangerous it is to go exploring at the Grand Canyon. And that's what he believes that he did. He believes he was like a treasure hunter or a gold miner or something like that. He was looking for lost treasures, you know, and that he had fallen from top of a high place and injured himself as he fell, and then couldn't get up to get help or take care of himself, and he laid there and died of starvation and heat. I mean, very detailed. So, and again, I never encouraged any of my children to say such things. I've always been very careful in not trying to influence them because that's the way my dad raised me. He was very careful to never influence me, to only allow me the opportunity to make up my own mind after being given all of the information from various different theories or various different um, ways to view things or whatever the case may be. And I have always raised my children the same way. I even apply that to our school. I homeschool them, and I don't give them just the Big Bang Theory. I give them all three options. And then I let them do the data research to come to their own conclusion on what they think is the reason or the mechanism behind how the universe was created. So for them to come tell me these stories are not anything that I influenced or that I allowed anyone else to try to influence them into believing. Some of the other symptoms that people have are feelings or memories of um, being in another time period or another era. For example, people are very drawn to Egypt or Greece or Native American culture or Scotland or the Mongolians or Africa or wherever. They have this, Asia, Japan. They have this, I don't want to say obsession, but very strong interests in another place, another location, another era. Maybe it was the Victorian era or medieval times or caveman times or whatever. But they have memories or familiarities to another time, another era, another place, maybe even another planet or dimension. And I firmly feel that this could very well be from having those residual DNA memories of past lives. And then again with the phobias, and there's a whole host of phobias, and any one of them or all of the above could have something to do with a past life experience. And not even necessarily that that's how you died, just that it was something that impacted you emotionally so strongly that you carried over to the next life. Um, so yeah, night terrors, unexplainable fears and phobias, um, feeling like you don't belong in the skin that you're in. And that can even be like the color of your hair, the color of your eyes, the color of your skin. Because I remember very, very strongly also saying that I'm supposed to have blue eyes. Why don't I have blue eyes anymore? I was really bummed to see I had brown eyes, like really bummed. I could not understand it. And my mother would say, "I don't know what you're talking about. You were born with brown eyes." And I'm like, "No, I was born with blue eyes." And I would say, just like the Ingalls girl on Little House on the Prairie, who was, the oldest one, Mary. I was like, "No, my eyes were as blue as hers. Why are they not blue now?" And the funny thing is about the eye color, every single eye doctor that I've ever been to has told me that I should have had blue eyes because I have a blue ring around the outside of my brown that you can only see if you shine a light in my eyes. So that's kind of wild. It actually looks purple unless you have like the right lighting like the eye doctors do. It just looks purple, which is kind of cool too, I think. But yeah, even the eye doctors say I should have had blue eyes. How do you explain that? That something could impact you so deeply that you bring it over to the next life like that? I find this very intriguing. And I also find it very detrimental to children and adults who feel like they do have past life memories that nobody ever believed or listened to or helped them to integrate into being this person that they are now, rather than still trying to be that person they used to be. You know, I don't want my child that remembers dying in the Grand Canyon to try to be that treasure hunting person any more than I want my child that remembers being my father in a past life to try to be my dad still. I want them to enjoy this life for who they are. I want them to be able to be whole and complete and present in this life. And I want the same thing for everybody else. And I really feel like I'm the person that can help you to do that. I really feel like I'm that beacon that can lead you home to self. So if you are that person, if you know someone that's that person, please reach out to me. Let me help you heal. Let me help you integrate. And I want to share a few of these really beautiful little snippets that I found of other people telling about their experiences with past life memories.
These are not things that you've learned. These are things that you had in your mind from the time you were born.
From before that time, because I remembered that I had been someplace else before. Now, what's interesting, that voice that I heard, that's my voice now.
These are not things that you've learned. These are things.
This young boy claimed he remembered his past life, and you will not believe what happened when they realised he was telling the truth. A young Syrian boy was born with a large birthmark on his face, and ever since he was able to talk, he would constantly say about how he had lived before. He used to also say that he was murdered with an axe by his neighbour. The remarks got so extreme that it was the only thing this boy would talk about, so his parents decided to look into it. They looked into the village where he said he had lived before, and it turned out a young boy who was 10 years old had gone missing there a few years before. So the family took a trip out to that village. The boy remembered where he lived and knocked on the door of the neighbour who supposedly killed him. The man went white as a sheet and looked extremely shocked. He said, I didn't kill anyone. But the young boy said he knew where he was buried and made him follow them down there. They proceeded to dig up the ground, where they found a young boy's skull which had been hit exactly where his birthmark was. The man later confessed to murder and was arrested and sentenced to death. This young boy claimed he remembered his past life, and you will not believe what happened.
One afternoon in the spring of 1990, a young mother tidied up her family's living room in Pingyang Township, which is a small rural community made up of several villages in southern China. And she was almost done when she heard her 3-year-old twin daughters start to cry. And this really caught her off guard, because even though these kids were only 3 years old and 3-year-olds cry, well, her daughters basically never cried. But the mom, she assessed her kids and couldn't see any injuries, they didn't seem sick. A couple of days later, and the twin girls were back to their normal routine, being totally silent and sleeping for most of the day. And as the girls slept in their nursery, their mom at some point walked down the hallway past the girls' bedroom. Now, their door to the nursery was shut. She can hear her girls making noise in their room, but they're making a noise that just doesn't make any sense to the mother. Her daughters were not crying or fussing, they were talking. And as she listened, she really couldn't believe what she was hearing. These girls weren't just babbling, saying random words. These girls were having a full-blown conversation with each other. The more the mother listened to her daughters, the more unsettled she became. The content of this discussion her 3-year-old daughters are having made no sense. These girls were talking about stuff that they could not possibly know. The girls were talking in detail about people and events from a totally different village. A village their mother knew they had never been to, had never even heard of, and certainly didn't know anybody who lived there. And so when this mother heard the sound of her twin girls who had never spoke before, she instantly understood that the only way my girls could have that information and be able to have this conversation is if they are reincarnated spirits. And so this mother did what she thought was right. Get the word out to the people not just in her village, but across the Pingyang Township that her twin daughters are actually reincarnated spirits. The mother's hope was that perhaps there was still family specifically of these reincarnated spirits in this other village her daughters were referencing in their conversation. And sure enough, less than a week after this mother got the word out, this man and woman who she didn't know came knocking at her door. When the mother let them inside the house, her girls immediately recognized them. One of the twins said that this was her mother and father from her previous life. Then the twins, these little 3-year-old girls, went on to tell this unbelievably complicated and sophisticated story about how in their previous life, these twin girls were not actually sisters. Instead, they were best friends. And together, they had taken their own lives approximately 1 month before they were reborn in the bodies of these twin girls. The mother of the twins asked this man and woman, "Are these details they're giving you accurate? Is this true?" And the man and woman said, "Yep, it's all true." The reason that they slept all the time is because when they slept, they would dream about their previous lives. To this day, no one's ever been able to offer a better explanation for how these twin girls had such accurate information about people they had never met and places they'd never been to. Basically, the only explanation that works is that they must actually be the reincarnated spirits of those teenage girls. One afternoon in the spring of 1990, a young mother tidied up her family's living room in Pyongyang.
Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of parents out there that are just as lost as they are at where to turn. There aren't very many people who are open to the idea that these children are reincarnating and realizing a past life. And there's not that many people offering them any solutions or help. And if they are, I would say the majority of them are not of an affordable um, option for many, many people. Now, in my profession, I already help many people to find closure, to move on with their life so that they can have a full life now, enjoy this life through all sorts of emotional trauma, inner child healing, all kinds of things. And I really, truly, deeply want to help these children and these parents to find the closure and the healing that they need to be able to connect their dots and integrate into this life, and also to be able to reveal and speak their truths so that we can right the wrongs of the past and we can all realize that we truly are so much more than this one life and this one chance. So, what I'm proposing is that if you are the parent or the child or the adult who remembers your past life and you need help connecting the dots and understanding this fully and integrating into this lifetime that you're in now, perhaps even understanding your purpose, I want to help you. And I am willing and able to do this by donation only. No set fees, no set amount of time. I want to help. I want to help you heal. And I want you to ask yourself, what would be the purpose of remembering past lives? Well, as I said before, sheer willpower or love alone could bring you back to a specific family or family member. But also, sheer willpower can bring you back with memories to help you fix something or make sure that justice is served. Or perhaps even to help bring awareness that our soul does live forever. Because after all, this is the Great Awakening, where we learn who we truly are, not just the truths of everything else. The most important one is learning who we are. And I think together we could truly reveal these truths, make real change, and wake so many more people up. I feel like this is a great way for us to begin healing and connecting and even regaining the truth and understanding of who we are, which includes gifts that we are born with. And one of those gifts is the gift of continued life. So, again, I want to offer my help to children and adults, parents, whoever you are, to help you to integrate the past life memories with your present life and to fully understand, heal, honor, and move on from whatever traumatic experience you brought with you from this past life so that you can fully be who you're meant to be in this life. Some may be wondering right now, how do you know if your child is suffering from past life memories? Because it isn't always obvious for various reasons. In fact, it goes overlooked so often that we really can't try to point blame at anyone. So think about patterns that your child has had since birth. Do they seem different? Do people say that they're an old soul? Were they more advanced or were they withdrawn? Do they say things that they shouldn't possibly be able to know? Do they have distinct birthmarks? Do they have distinct unexplainable ailments like headaches or sleep disorders, sleep paralysis, night terrors, things like that? And if you're not sure, I also welcome a consultation so that we can find out. Because a lot of times it does go overlooked. And there's no judgment and there's no blame in that. There's only the opportunity to now correct it, to help your child to integrate and heal. And again, I promise you, you or your child will get the same respect that I gave to mine and that my dad gave to me. No influencing, no preconceived notions, just an honest look and honest questions to determine what exactly it is that's going on. And granted, I will be using my intuitive energy reading abilities because that's just who I am. But I will not try to lead anyone or convince anyone of anything other than their own truth. And that is my promise to you. My mission, my goal is to heal you one soul at a time. So please visit the link in the description box below if you are interested in a consultation and sessions to help integrate and heal yourself or your loved one. Help them to understand better and connect the dots to integrate between the past life and the present one. And I want to leave you with this adorable video of this little savant. Thank you for watching.